Welcome to the live stream of day 2 of the Forge Your Future Challenge. It's good to see everybody here. And, I think that going into day 2 of the Forge Your Future Challenge, you're kind of in that middle spot where you've gotten a lot of stuff yesterday when we talked about the concept of awareness and clarity, tapping into your awareness, and again, going through the exercises, which I hope you all did. If you haven't done that yet and you're here watching the replay of this, then you might want to go back and check out day 1 of the Forge Your Future Challenge. So that way you can actually complete this fine worksheet, which we also have one for today, which you should have received via email. If you didn't get it, we'll be able to provide it for you here as well. It'll be in the YouTube description after the fact. If you're watching the replay of this, you should be able to check that out in the description. If you're here live, we'll be able to, in theory, get them into the chat. Sarah is monitoring and moderating the chat here. We see a lot of return folks here today. We've got Gloria Jean back. We've got Ksenia back. We've got Christina again here as well. Tim. And a whole bunch of others. Now, if you're watching the replay of this, you should be able to interact and check out the chat. If you have any issues with that, just send an email to hello@mikevardy.com, and either myself or Sarah will be able to help you out. This is the worksheet for day 2. So for those of you that were here for day 1, I'll ask in the chat, how did you do with the worksheet yesterday? I know that Gloria Jean in particular posted to the Facebook group, which we still have going. So if you are on Facebook and you want to join that group, that invitation was also sent to you in email. Sarah just has to approve you to be part of the group, and you'll be good to go. So when you share your big action move, whether it's inside that community, whether it's in the chat here on YouTube, or whether you are part of the Time Crafting Trust community and you've shared it in there, I hope that you took care of your big action move for yesterday. We've got more to come today, and I want to get right to it because you'll notice that I'm probably, compared to yesterday, I've got a bit more of a darker shirt on with the word September. We're doing this in September. September Coffee is one of my coffee companies of choice, and as yesterday, I have my "What Good Shall I Do This Day" mug. And so with that in mind, why did I wear this particular t-shirt today? Why am I looking like maybe I'm a bit of a flowing head? Well, realistically, the name September Coffee, by the way, the back of the shirt is completely, there's a crazy design on the back of it that I would not wear on camera. But this, just to see the word September, number one, it's the start of my year. So that month has something, special for me. I don't know when you start your year, but when you do, it's nice to have that clarity around that. Secondly, and actually, interestingly, I was watching a video yesterday. I think I shared it elsewhere, but Leonard Cohen was doing an interview a number of years ago. Obviously, a well-known poet, musician, and Canadian. And during an interview, he actually, the question was, "Did you ever think about changing your name?" And he said, "Yes." He goes, "Actually, I was going to change my name to September." And the interviewer kind of chuckled, and she said, "Leonard September?" He goes, No, September Cohen." And she said, "Oh, well, September, that's not really a standard name," or it was something along those lines. And he said, "September's a standard, word." And to me, when I started, he said he was going to do it when he started his singer-songwriter career. And his reasoning was, September's just like, it's a new beginning. It's fresh. It's that sort of thing. And I found that fascinating because there's other people that start their year in September. Gretchen Rubin, who I alluded to yesterday. Martin Short, another fellow Canadian who aligned his with his school year. We actually grew up in the same city, and, school started in September, so he aligned it with there. And I've, followed that lead. But again, why just a plain shirt with September on it? It just happens to be that it's my favorite coffee company. They have these t-shirts, but this shirt is not overwhelming. It's very clear. Again, September, I can see it. It's why I pulled that out of the closet and out of, my Project 333, Courtney Carver with her great wardrobe challenge. It's why I'm using it for the next, month or so. It's just to remind me that September is the start of my year. And I don't want to fall into any kind of trap as the year progresses. I want to resolve to be able to live up to my annual axiom. I want to be able to avoid the very thing that we're going to touch on today, and that is overwhelm. I'll get rid of that little countdowny thing there, and it's gone. Bring myself in as that way you don't just see you'll see me too. So hold on one second here while I put myself into the mix. Options, picture in picture. There we go. Maybe move myself over a touch so that way you can see me. All right, so we are into day 2 of the Forge Your Future Challenge. Now, Tim in the chat says, wake me up when September ends. I'm actually loving September so far. We're only 4 days into it, and I'm having a great time. And Ksenia starts her year in September as well. So if you were here for day 1 live, or if you took the day 1 replay, what I want you to do is make sure that you have that capture list that we did during the exercise, during the live stream yesterday. We're going to have another exercise today as well. So keep that in mind. You will want to have that at the ready. Not only the worksheets, if you haven't already got them, although you can do the worksheets whenever you want, prior to taking the next day, of course. But there will be an exercise that could involve yesterday's kind of brain dump that we talked about. If you don't have that handy, it's okay. During today's workshop, this is again another kind of benefit of doing this this kind of challenge, is as things come to mind, I want you to get them out of your head and put them somewhere that you trust, digitally or analog. So you might be building a kind of a brain dumped list as we go through the workshop today. If you want to use that for the exercise later on, you could do that too. But if you have access to that list that we put together yesterday, all you need to do is have it ready. Don't do anything with it. All right. So without further ado, let's get into it. So how many of you feel like this? You know, when you're looking at your day, when you wake up and you start your day, or you know, as Tim pointed out, wake me up when September ends. If you're already feeling this way, you've got, you know, very complicated things that you need to do. There's check marks. You can see there's a lot of stuff going on. Just mundane things like eat, sleep, take a break. It can be very overwhelming. And today, overcoming overwhelm is our challenge. If you want to forge your future, you need to be able to overcome overwhelm. So the challenge in my life, and this is Amanda Palmer, really is keeping the balance between feeling creatively energized and fulfilled without feeling overwhelmed and like I'm in the middle of a battlefield. Now, whether or not you are a fan of Amanda Palmer or not, some people are, some people aren't, the message is sound, right? It's balance. It's the idea of how do I stay energized creatively? And we touched on that, I think, yesterday with the Taylor Swift idea of your energy is a luxury and you only have so much of it to spend, so on and so forth. How do I do that without and stay fulfilled without being overwhelmed, right? When you hear somebody like, and again, I'm going to throw the celebrity thing out there with Taylor Swift, how prolific she is. The fact that she was able, weirdly enough, and I don't know how this was able to happen, but she's got a team, and you know, we got to look at that from that perspective. But during her tour, that Eras tour, she not only wrote, but recorded an entire new album that's coming out in October of 2025. October, I believe, 10th, I think, or 3rd or 13th. Actually, it's the 13th. Either way, the point is how do you do all that stuff without being overwhelmed and that feeling like you're in the middle of a battlefield? And that's a lot of this. It's feeling. When you feel overwhelmed, it can short circuit. It can short circuit what you've got going on. It can short circuit your efforts, your outcomes. Amanda Palmer is an author and an artist. Christina, for those that don't know. And she wrote a book called, I believe, The Art of Asking. You know, the idea of being creative and how to have that balance. And this doesn't just apply to creativity, by the way, be feeling just energized in general. How do you do that? How do you make sure that you keep overwhelm at bay? Well, here's the thing. First off, you need to understand that overwhelm shows up in 3 different ways. And you want to have that distinction in front of you. So that way you can decide, which you're going to tackle, why the overwhelm is showing up. And the three are overload, overchoice, and the overcommitment or to overcommit. And we'll talk about how it shows up, but if you really think about it, and we're going to go through this during our time here today, the idea of any or all of these three contributing to overwhelm is pretty clear, right? And when you can break things down, such as a project, into its smallest parts, you can make progress, right? It's one of the things I talk about in my work, and it's what I talked about yesterday to a degree as well. For that clarity to show up when you break things down, you can actually see things clearer. You can make progress. Whether it's the smallest step, whether it's the amount of time you spend on it, so on and so forth, you can see things and make progress bit by bit, slowly but surely. Well, when you break down anything, you can actually tackle it better. So when you break down what the ingredients of overwhelm are, and you see them as, okay, am I feeling overloaded? Do I have too many options? Am I, feeling overchoice because it's presenting that way? Or have I just taken on too much? Have I committed? Have I said yes to too many things? And the distinction between all three, I think, is really important. So we're going to talk about these three different ways that overwhelm shows up. And the first one that we're going to touch on is overload. Okay? And that's possibly how you could be feeling just simply based on the first day of this challenge, right? I gave you a lot of information, right? A ton of it. And in some cases, if you don't take some time and space to break it down, and Tim alluded to the fact, I think in the chat, he said, and I'll add it to the broadcast, not much time to think about day one content in detail, but I found my thoughts focusing most on activating my to-do list, which is great. That's one of the clarifying tactics. Ensuring tasks have strong verbs, but also some kind of clear deliverable. And again, there was a lot there, which is why I asked you to choose one of the three clarifying tactics. But when you're overloaded, that could be a very clear signal that overwhelm is on its way, or, you're already there. So let's talk about what overload looks like. And overload is defined as an excessive load or amount of something. So if you put too much into onto a truck, and when you're driving, and my dad was a truck driver, so you would go to the weigh station, and if he weighed more than what he was allowed to, he was overloaded, right? If you look at your day, and actually I was watching Cal Newport's clips yesterday with his interview with Mel Robbins, and he talked about the idea of the to-do list being a wish list. If you follow Cal Newport's work, you definitely can understand what I'm talking about, and this isn't new to you. But basically, by having that list in front of you, he calls it a wish list because you put too much on your day to possibly accomplish. Depending on who you are and how you feel, that could be an overload situation. You've overloaded your day, right? So you filled the space too much with what it can possibly hold. And another example would be like, electrical. And this is where I get into the story about when we don't have it anymore, and there's a reason. We used to have an electric lawnmower. Now, we live in an old house, over 100 years old here in Victoria, BC. And when we moved in here, one of our neighbors was getting rid of a lawnmower, and it was an electric lawnmower. We don't have a huge lawn, so we didn't really need to go and buy a brand new lawnmower, and they were generous enough to give us a lawnmower. When we moved in here, because it's an old house, there was older electrical panels and even the amount of plugs and receptacles and all that stuff were limited, right? Because it was an older house. We weren't, I guess, we were at 110 instead of 220. For those of you that are electrical terms, you might know what that means, and I might be butchering it, but nonetheless, there was the risk of, if we plugged in too many things in the kitchen, that the breaker would blow. And we knew that. We had experienced that. And even to this day, if we use the air fryer and the microwave at the same time, the circuit will blow, right? Well, the same thing would happen with the lawnmower. We would plug the lawnmower in and it would occasionally trip the breaker. So we couldn't make much progress with mowing the lawn. And it's very visible. If you ever mowed a lawn, you can tell what's been mowed and what hasn't, right? So it was incredibly frustrating because we were constantly resetting. So we really had a couple of choices here, right? One was to, improve the electrical in our house. And the other was to get a different lawnmower, right? Because we couldn't exactly, sure, in the kitchen, we could navigate it. We could say, okay, don't use this at the same time, so on and so forth. But when it came to mowing the lawn, it was all we had. So we had to make a choice around that. Once we did that, all of a sudden, we were able to mow the lawn, right? It took far less time to mow the lawn. I didn't have any kind of animosity towards our yard because we took steps to reduce the overload. And this is part of the thing, is when you're looking at overload, you need to figure out how to overcome it. And there's 3 distinct ways that you can overload it, right? Number 1, paying attention and forging new patterns. I just gave you an example of that. We noticed that this was happening and we made a change. We forged a new pattern. All right. What does that mean? We had a couple of choices as to what we could do. There weren't a ton of choices around it, so that certainly wasn't overchoice, right? And it wasn't like we were overcommitted. It wasn't like I was mowing, more than one lawn, or it wasn't like we were running into any kind of issues where there was just too much that I've said yes to, and that's why the lawnmower wasn't, progressing in the way I would like, and that's why that chore took too long. We were able to pay attention, both my wife and I, and particularly me, because that was one of my jobs, was to mow the lawn and say, okay, well, here's what do you want to do here? Secondly, and this is another way to do it, is to set limits and boundaries. So again, with that air fryer and microwave in our kitchen, we know you don't run both at the same time. That's a limit. Because if we run both at the same time, everything stops, or at the very least slows down, right? So if you are looking at your to-do list, and I can see that Tim talks about this, and John Lamerton, who is a author that we're talking about in our Time Crafting Trust book club, he says in the routine machine, John Lamerton calls it a could-do list, and he likes that idea, which I think is great. So again, when you've got could do, then you are automatically adding a qualifier that says, hey, I don't have to do all this. So the overload in this case would be something that I would be manufacturing. If I look at the whole list, just like if you looked at your brain dump, you go, oh my goodness, this is too much, too much. But not everything has to be done that day, right? You need to have context around it. And that could-do list does that, right? And then finally, the third thing is to clearly communicate. So if you, and it's really clear that if you're going to set limits and boundaries, communication is so key, right? If Sarah and I, Sarah, helps with my business, she helps run the community. She's an incredible person who has the ability to not only do, a lot of the administrative work and also is a great sounding board, but she also handles a lot of managing the community and such. And it's great that she does all that. But she also acts as a bit of a circuit breaker for me and my work as well, because we can look at ClickUp and see all of these things. And it's like, okay, well, what really matters? What are the things that we've promised to our community? What are the things that Mike, you're an author, make sure that you have that stuff going on. So that clear communication keeps you not only from overload, but also one of the other ingredients. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it creates parameters that allows you to move forward without blowing a circuit in the process. And you don't really know when overload, unfortunately, is the cause until the circuit trips, right? And it has to happen on multiple occasions too. That's the other thing. You have to test your load, setting limits and boundaries. And then once you figure out, okay, this is too much, then that helps you deal with this overload. And by the way, there's a lot of crossover between overload and overcommitment. We'll share the distinction here in a little bit. But it's really important for your energy, for your anxiety, if you have it, for those of you that have ADHD challenges, overload and overcommitment, and all of these can wreak havoc with you. But to understand, hey, this is about as much as I can do on a given day, week, month, and making sure that you don't go overboard. There's another over there, right? So I want you to keep these things in mind, but you can't overcome any of these, especially overload, if you're not paying attention, right? Which is why, if you haven't already watched day 1 of this challenge, I think it's critical that you do, because you need to be aware and you need to have clarity, because you won't be able to tell, is this overload? Is this overchoice? Am I overwhelmed? And all of a sudden burnout shows up and you wonder how you got there. So these 3 tactics, these 3 kind of steps, these 3 things to keep in mind will help you overcome the idea of overload. Okay. And if you're in the chat right now and you feel overloaded, like you feel like overload is the source of your overwhelm, go ahead and put it in the chat. Right? Yeah. Yep. Definitely overload. You could even make that distinction before we move on to those other ingredients, but we will move on to the other ingredients. All right. So the next one is, of course, overchoice. Now, before I move into what overchoice is, this is a term that was coined by Alvin Toffler in his book Future Shock years ago in the 70s. Basically, the definition of overchoice is a cognitive impairment in which people have a difficult time making a decision when faced with many options. So if you're in the chat right now, how many of you immediately go, yep, that's it. That's what my overwhelm is. I have too many choices. I'm facing overchoice. And when Toffler put a name to it, what was interesting is about that I found is it really showcased back then how many options you had in front of you that were either external or internal, number one. But think about it today. So if this happened in, let's say, I think it was 1973, 74, that time. So we're talking 50 years ago. Do you think the amount of choice that we have available to us now, 50 years later, is greater or less by default than it was in the 70s? Right? I would say, especially when it comes to things like news, when it comes to things like technology, when it comes to things like, entertainment, when it comes to things like, again, the internet. Even here's an interesting thing that we can dive into almost right away. For those of you that are spending any kind of time with generative AI at all, and I know it's a trendy hot button topic right now, but this is the way that AI has kind of presented itself, generative AI, to the mainstream public over the last year, 2 years, or et cetera, is ChatGPT is an option. Oh, but now you've got Claude. Oh, but now you've got Gemini. Oh, now you've got Copilot. So now all of a sudden you've got all of these things, some of which can do general generative AI and do everything kind of okay. Others are more specialized, right? And then you've got prompts. Well, what prompts do I do, right? So all of a sudden you're making choices around, well, what's the best AI tools for me to use? What is the best social media platforms for me to use, right? What makes the most sense to me? Oh, wait, but my kids are on my kids are on Snapchat I want to know what's going on with TikTok, so I'm going to check that out. Oh, but they're on Instagram. Oh, but you know what? LinkedIn, that's where all of a sudden you've got all these things. And this amount of choice, before you even commit to anything, before you even say, here are all the things that are loading up my days, the choices often are the things that kind of you can catch. Now, what's great about this is that there are some tactics that you can use to kind of put yourself in place. But remember, and this is from Barry Schwartz, and I'm trying to remember offhand where I believe he's written about, the name is escaping me right now because I'm thinking Tony, another gentleman. But nonetheless, when I found this quote, stumbled upon it back when I first did the Forge Your Future Challenge, this is one of the ones that I kind of glommed onto. Learning to choose is hard. Learning to choose well is harder. And learning to choose well in a world of unlimited possibilities is hard, or still perhaps too hard. And I'm glad Tim and Ksenia both put this inside of the chat. So I'm going to put Tim's up here. Making choices about generative AI is a rare thing that doesn't bother me. And Ksenia said, I'm with you, Tim. Well, here's the thing. You're not faced with overchoice if you don't care about the thing. If it doesn't actually move the needle for you, that's great. That is an immediate elimination, right? And there are going to be things that you eliminate without feeling the friction of choice. I'll give you an example in my own life that's more of a personal thing, professional. I am a Cincinnati Bengals football fan. Anyone who's followed me for a while on social or in my community knows this. And as we're recording this and doing this challenge, in a couple of days, the NFL season opens up. And it will be going all the way until February. And hopefully the Bengals will also be going all the way until February. But there's a big business and a big, this hobby is huge, called fantasy football. And this is not just unique to the NFL. It's Major League Baseball has it. The National Hockey League has it. The NBA. Football of the other variety, the more notable variety over in the overseas and outside of North America. Fantasy sports has been around for a long, long, long time, and it's only become more popular. As I used to play fantasy sports, particularly hockey, because I knew a lot about it. I didn't really do the other ones. Over time, as I've gotten a bit older, wiser, and priorities have shifted, I have outright dismissed fantasy football or any of the fantasy sports stuff for a number of reasons. Number one, there are too many things to choose from within the parameters of fantasy sports that I just can't be bothered with. Mainly because it would kind of thrust me into watching games that I really don't want to watch over the long term. I'm not going to learn much watching the, paying attention today to the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Dallas Cowboys. Again, I'll watch the game, but I don't want to track it, right? Similarly, I don't want to track my own team. I want to enjoy the process of watching the game. So by virtue of that, much like Tim and Ksenia, it doesn't interest me, so it's no longer something I even need to concern myself with, because overchoice can lie within the confines of that. Ask anyone who plays fantasy. Ask anyone who gambles on sports. And there are so many things that you can gamble on, or just gamble in general. And, when you've got parlays and all this stuff. As soon as I start hearing all that stuff, number one, I feel like I have too many options in front of me. That's the first thing. So I want to eliminate all of these incredible amount of options. Secondly, I start to feel overloaded when I do explore it a bit. I'm like, oh, there's way too much here. And therefore, I step back. And by doing that, there is no overwhelm. Now, that's a very personal, maybe even not, mundane or even innocuous thing in the eyes of those of you that are taking part in the challenge. But for some, it might not be. And there could be some elements that, you need that may matter more to you, that you allow you to face overchoice. So I learned during my years at Costco how overchoice can harm you in ways that you don't even realize. So my professional career started at Costco back in 1995. So there we go. And I was with Costco for about 12 years. That's what brought me out here to the West Coast of Canada. And the thing about Costco, for those of you that, and if you're a Costco fan, there is a good number of us out there, even for those that, have worked there and stuff. I mean, they're a great company to work for, at least when I was there. And I know that they're still quite good. We don't go to Costco very often, but when we go in with missions, right? We know what we're going to get there. And by virtue of that, we already have created limits and boundaries. Spoiler alert, there's going to be one of the ways to overcome overchoice is limits and boundaries. But Costco imposes them to a degree already, because the distinction between, say, a Sam's Club, which is Walmart's kind of version of Costco, or big box store stuff, and Costco is the amount of items available. Costco, there's fewer items available of any variety. There's fewer items, period. The SKU count, which is what we would call it, is vastly different. Way more options at Walmart or BJ's or any of these other big box stores, or any of these other stores that may not be big box stores, but they offer a variety of them, a variety of products. Costco keeps their inventory lean and their offerings lean. One of which is ketchup. Now, some of you may have heard this story before, or this anecdote, I guess, is probably a better way to put it. But let's think about this. So if you are a ketchup fan and you go into Costco, you are going to find this type of ketchup, Heinz. That's the brand you're going to find. And if you don't like Heinz ketchup, then you're not going to buy ketchup at Costco. That's the first thing. If you like another type of ketchup, you'll go somewhere else to buy ketchup. That's the first thing. Let's say you do like Heinz ketchup. All right. You're a family of 4. You're going in there, and let's say the actual initial the initial starter is, if you better hope that enough people like ketchup, because why would you buy ketchup at Costco if not enough people like it, regardless of brand? Because when you go to Costco, there are 3 definitive sizes, typically. Let's say we use this as an example because this definitely happened in my time at Costco. There are the little 3-pack combo, often, or 2-pack, let's say. Sometimes it's mixed within, during barbecue season, it's mixed with, like, say, relish and mustard. But typically it's a 2-pack of ketchup of this size. All right. The second option is the giant can. If you've seen that Seinfeld episode where Kramer goes to Costco and buys like the giant, can of olives and such, there is a giant can of ketchup. And back in the day, when I was running the food court there, we would use those and put the ketchup, the lid for the what's it called? The pump on top of the can. And that's how people would get their ketchup. Again, I'm dating myself. They definitely don't do that now. And then the third option, which is what most restaurants would use, especially fast food ones, or let's say a ballpark or somebody that's offering, like single serve ketchups, there'd be the single serve packets, right? So if you like ketchup, you're still looking at it. You like Heinz? Great. All right. Do I run a restaurant? Do I have a camping site that I need to buy these packets of ketchup for? No. Or maybe, do I like to have ketchup for my kids in school? And maybe I'll buy these packets for that. But you know what? I could just put it in Tupperware. No, don't need that. All right. This big giant tin. Do I even have like a lid that will fit this thing? Like, and how? I'm not going to put a pump in my fridge. We don't like ketchup that much. All right. I guess I'm not going to buy that tin. Oh, well, then I guess the only option really is this 2-pack of ketchup. And it goes into the grocery cart. All right, great. Then you start, so and this all happens in a split second, by the way. This is not something that you have to walk through. Telling the story is often longer than actually thinking it. You go down the aisle, and all of a sudden you see this pair of jeans, or this giant Halloween decoration, or a book. I know they don't sell as many books, or all these weird things that you wouldn't necessarily expect on the end cap. And oh man, those jeans, they look really great. Hey, let me pick up some of those. And oh, look, there's some batteries, and we don't need, they only sell, a big pack of batteries, but we could use them. So, and as you're making your way through Costco and you get to the cash, and this is a story as old as Costco itself, you went in with a list. You got the things on the list, which is great, or at least most of them, what they had, but you also got some extra stuff you didn't necessarily anticipate. You got that pair of jeans, you got that book, you got those batteries. You bought that Halloween decoration, and your bill, which you would have anticipated was around $150 to $200, all of a sudden is $400, right? Why? Why did that happen? Well, there's a number of reasons. Costco is very good at strategically placing material to create this treasure hunt mentality. But more importantly, because you didn't face as much decision fatigue when you were shopping for ketchup and a variety of other items, you're not tired as much. It leaves you open to purchasing things you wouldn't otherwise purchase. This often happens for someone who's never been in a Costco before as well. Then if you're a seasoned shopper, you normally get a little bit better at this because you've recognized that, oh, wow, that's why the story is went in to buy milk and butter at Costco and came out with a TV, right? But the other thing is, and this is what's happening lately with Costco's, and this is, again, back to overchoice. How many of you, when you go into a Costco nowadays, see the lineups going all the way down the aisles? It's happening here where it's like, oh my goodness, that's why they have self-checkout there now. They didn't have it before. Now you're faced with the choice of which cashier do you go to? There's a choice, a decision that has to be made there. If you find that all the time when you go to Costco, it's super busy, then facing that choice of, oh man, it's going to be so many people there, it will change the way you approach how you purchase at Costco. You'll still pick the ketchup that you want, but you might avoid some of the bigger items because you know you're going to be facing a long lineup. Or conversely, you've already made the choice to go into Costco and you're willing to come to terms and deal with everything that comes its way. But what Costco has done really well is by limiting its amount of choices available to you, it's making you not have to decide as much, which then opens you up to buying things you might not otherwise purchase. That's all part of the strategy. Simple, flexible, durable, sustainable. That's why Costco works. They don't spend money on the crazy things. They focus on the experience for the customer as much as possible. And again, businesses tend to change a bit over time, but this Costco still holds true, this Costco story. So how do you overcome overchoice? All right, so set limits and boundaries. Let's use the Costco example again. Because you're writer, right? What you know. We already talked. Okay, so if you are knowing that you have to go to Costco to buy food, to grocery shop, the first thing you're going to do is make that list, right? And you may actually build a list that's just for items that work well in bulk from Costco. Already you're setting limits. You know you're not going to go in there and buy the ketchup because your family doesn't like that brand or you don't go through that much ketchup. There's an example. Secondly, you're going to look at the days of the week, of which there are 7. And you're going to look at your schedule and you're going to decide when is a good day for me to go to Costco. Now, if you've been to Costco before and you have more available boundaries for yourself, then you may say going on a weekend is a bad idea because everybody's going to be going on the weekend. So what day or night would be better for me to go? Might not be a Monday, because you've been on a Monday and it was really busy. But a Wednesday wasn't too bad, or a Tuesday wasn't too bad. All of a sudden, you've created some limits and boundaries. And by the way, this also dovetails into the crafting rituals and routines around it, because you could apply that here as well. It's the second thing to think about. And then finally, when you're in Costco, again, we're only going to go down these aisles. We're going to so again, you're making these choices all the time. And you're reducing the amount of friction when you do that. So by setting limits and boundaries, hey, I'm only going to choose this because of X, Y, or Z, that helps you with overchoice. When it comes to the productivity diet that I've written about and time crafting, often setting limits and boundaries comes in the fashion of setting up themes, whether it's daily themes, monthly themes, etc. Even the annual axiom will inform your choices, right? But you have some things that are external to you, and then you have things that are internal. Some external stuff, Tim saying, didn't have a lot of time to think about this stuff because of X, Y, Z. Well, X, Y, Z you need to take into account, or X, Y, Z. So setting limits and boundaries for you makes sense when it comes to overcoming overchoice. Crafting rituals and routines. Again, theming plays in nicely here. When I get up first thing in the morning, my ritual is to make myself a nice pour over. And it's tasty. Pour over coffee. That's my ritual first thing in the morning. End of the day, I journal. Those are the two things that have been portable in my routines, but also have given me the most amount of, I would say, either contentment, joy, or progress. Because again, we talked about journaling yesterday. I can see where I've come, where I've been, and how far I've come, and where the friction points are. So those rituals, and by the way, the morning and evening routine, they are bookends to your day. So even when the day goes mental for you, let's say you're overwhelmed throughout the course of the day, start there. You're like, you know what though? I know at the end of the day, I'm going to pack my lunch for tomorrow. I'm going to journal, and I am going to do one, and I'm going to, let's say, have a bath, right? Let's say those are your three things. And those are my three things. And that way, when I wake up in the morning as a night owl, my ritual is get up, run my hair and head under a rain shower of cold water to wake myself up, make the pour over coffee, and then read. Those bookends help me start and end my day with certainty. And we talked about uncertainty yesterday as well. So I've engineered certainty. So even if the day goes crazy, I know that this happens at the end. I know that this happens tomorrow. And I would argue, and I've said this before, whether you're an early riser or a night owl, early bird or night owl, whatever you want to say, is I believe the evening routine is just as, if not more important than the morning routine. Because for night owls, it allows them to set the tone for the next day when their brains are kind of not necessarily all there to start off the day. And for early risers and early birds, it allows them to hit the ground running if they prepare, if they have an evening routine that sets them up for the next day as well. And that way they're not kind of losing their prime time first thing in the morning. So again, rituals and routines can be super helpful with us. You don't want to overdo it though, because that can overwhelm you as well. So, even just a morning and evening routine, and that's it, could be helpful. Theming one day can be helpful. Theming 1 month can be helpful. Any of these ritualization or routinization techniques can be super helpful. And again, I already alluded to John Lambert's in the book, The Routine Machine. There's a great way to kind of dive into it. So that's the second way to overcome overchoice. And finally, the third is to ask someone you trust. Whether it's, again, we talked about this earlier. Hey, Sarah, we have all these things we could do. What should I do? What should we focus on? Because often you can be too close to the issue. You lose perspective. If you're very close, you don't get to see you might see certain details, but you could get tunnel vision at the same time. You don't see as wide, right? So if you step back, you could see more, but sometimes the stepping back involves, hey, what do you think? So ask someone you trust. And it doesn't have to be, the person that your partner, it doesn't have to be that person. It could be a friend. It could be whomever you trust, right? In some instances, and we're seeing this happen more and more, although I think that we could reach a tipping point. And I brought up AI already once. Run it by AI. I was watching reading a post about Alex Hormozi, who is the founder of School, and very polarizing might not be the right word. I'll use it anyway. Polarizing and intriguing entrepreneur. And someone pointed out that they built an AI board of directors based on archetypes. Alex Hormozi was one, and there were like 3 others. And they were starting to run their decisions through, certain decisions, not all, through this AI board of directors. And that was a way to kind of create some limits and boundaries for themselves and ask someone, air quotes, that they trust. That might not be for you. Again, no judgment here. I've done it a little bit. I've actually played with that aspect of it. More often than not, I found that it's my gut. And of course, we all know that cognitive biases can show up in AI if it's you that's presenting it. Things like confirmation bias, all that stuff. But that could be the way you ask someone that you trust, right? Also, when you ask someone you trust when you're going through the situation, you are also cultivating a relationship with that person as well. So it serves two purposes. Obviously, you don't want to use them just as a sounding board for every single thing. I think that can also tread into somewhat dangerous or maybe middling territory. But all 3 of these can help you overcome overchoice. And decisions are, Annie Duke talks about how to decide in her book. She talks about thinking in bets. We are making choices constantly, right? And remember that you always do have a choice. It may not be the best options. And, for example, when I work with clients, and I alluded to this before, I'm not happy in my job, or if someone emails me and says, I don't like what I'm doing I'm overwhelmed. My boss doesn't listen to me. Believe me, I've seen my fair share of those TikTok videos or Instagram videos where the boss is texting back and forth, like the nightmare boss scenario. That aside, if you're looking at all of this stuff and someone says, what should I do? I'm like, well, quit your job. Oh, I couldn't do that. I can't do that. It's not true. You can't. I mean, I'm not saying you should. And you may not be, it may not be cut and dried, but you do have a choice. And with those choices, I can't quit my job. I've got mortgage payments. Okay, well, sell your house, move into a smaller place, move to another country, move to a place where you can afford. And by the way, when remote work was happening, that level of choice could take place. It presented itself a whole bunch of different options. So we do have choice. May not like the choices that are in front of us. We may be faced with dilemmas rather than, options. But we do have choice. The key is, when you have too many, is how do you deal with it? And these are 3 ways that you can deal with it. All right. So moving on, again, the 3 ways that these show up: overload, overchoice, and then finally, overcommitting, which is something that I've struggled with more than probably the other 2 at this point. And I'll explain why. And it has a lot to do with the work that I do. So first off, let's say what overcommitment is. And it's to obligate beyond the ability of fulfillment, for fulfillment rather. So I love my time crafting framework. It started out as the Now Year formula. Then it became the Now Year method. And then the term time crafting came to be, and I allude to that in my book, how I came up with that term. I have to thank my son, Colton, for that. And anybody who has a framework, whether it's something that they've kind of forged and fostered, or let's say you're testing an application, or let's say you're testing boundaries of certain things that you've put in place. This may be, I don't think this is unique to me. I think that there is something around the idea of how far can I push this? What's the breaking point? And you bend it until you hit that breaking point. Well, time crafting, as the person who is kind of experimenting with it consistently, I have committed to the point where I can see how far the system will go until it breaks. When you talk about theming your time, yeah, that's a bucket that things fit into. Great. As long as I can navigate that, that's fine. Oh, my monthly theme for September is shipping. What are all my shipping tasks, let's say? Or my daily theme today, daily is delivery. What are the things I need to deliver? That sort of thing. So these things, these buckets, these, for lack of a better term, I can fill those, right? Instead of looking at the whole of my list, right? Instead of looking at that, I can look at these buckets, for lack of a better term, these themes. Attention paths, that's another way that I can kind of navigate this. And I talk about time crafting in the productivity diet as well. And for those who follow my work for a while, you know all this. But I want to see how far I can push it. And I've wanted to see how far I can push it. And that's where I run into issues, because I'm human, just like anybody else. And even though I'm, position myself as someone who knows quite a bit about time management, managing your relationship with time is probably a more apt description, and being productive, time crafting is a framework that I have pushed and pushed and pushed, basically to kind of prove to myself that, hey, see, this works. But also, when I work with clients or I work with my community, I can say, hey, look, I pushed it to this degree and it bent, but it didn't break. I've definitely obligated beyond the ability for fulfillment while putting things through the paces here. So to me, Sartre brings this up, and I always butcher his name. I usually say Sartre, and believe me, Canadian, part French, so I should be able to at least navigate that. But commitment is an act, not a word. And that's where things can get muddy for me, and not just for me. I'm sure that some of you out there feel the same way, where it's like, oh, I'll commit to that. I'll commit to that. Yes, 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 yes. No problem. Yep, in this period of time, sure, I'll do that. And the problem is that a mechanism is only as strong as its operator, right? So I could be time crafting like crazy, but if I'm not able to fulfill those things, then the framework will only take me so far. Now, the great thing about it, to be fair, is I can recognize it a lot more because of time crafting. So I can see, oh my goodness, like, yeah, I've got too much, and I can easily move things if I take the time to do so. But I'll be completely vulnerable up front. Sarah and I can look and click up, and Sarah goes, "Oh, remember this thing we said we were going to do? We haven't done it yet." There's, things, sometimes it's that Douglas Adams quote of, "I love deadlines, the sound that they make when they go whooshing by." Nobody is perfect in this realm. And they often say they teach what we need to learn the most. So I would say of the three ingredients that lead me to overwhelm, overcommitment is the one, right? So why do we overcommit? Well, we get smitten with things. Shiny objects, right? Hey, I want to try this thing. Again, back to generative AI. Oh my goodness, look how great this is. Notebook LM, I can do a whole bunch of stuff with this. Oh, look at this tool. Oh, look at that. Again, I think, when you capture these things, and I've often said capture everything, regret nothing. There's some nuance I'm going to add to that. I'm actually at the point now where I don't necessarily agree with that phrase 100%. I'll share more on that in my work a little bit later. But when you get smitten with something, you want to do it, right? I want to see this thing. I want to do it. All right, great. Wait, I've already committed to a bunch of other things. Sorry, can't do it. Or you do it with less quality in mind and more quantity in mind, because when you overcommit, then you have more things to do, and none of them get done terribly well in that instance. So often I get smitten with a project, right? That's one way that it shows up. So you have to say this to yourself. And I've had to get better at this too. Realistic stuff. Tim mentions, and I'll put this because I do like this. It's important to remember the danger of distant elephants. I like that. I'm not the only one that likes that. No means no. You have to say this to yourself, but you also have to say it to others in a way that actually doesn't sound like you're dismissing them outright. At least not up front. Because Diana mentions people pleasing. Because that's another thing. You can overcommit because, hey, I want to please this person. I want to serve all of this. It's why, honestly, in business, they say you have to have what they say is an avatar, the ideal customer. And that's who you should be focusing on. It's really tricky when you're somebody who likes to please, because you want to please people. So you want to find a way to please all of them. But, I'll allude to another. I love music, and there's a famous song from Ricky Nelson, who passed away quite a number of years ago, but the song Garden Party, he goes, you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself. Now, I mean, he didn't mean, hey, just do your own thing, be selfish all the time, but in a lot of instances, you need to be selfish so you can be selfless. You have to take care of yourself so you can take care of others. And when you overcommit, you run risk of not being able to do that for yourself, which means you certainly can't serve others. So, you have to stop in your tracks. Say no, right? So, how do you overcome overcommitment? I think the biggest thing, and we already did this yesterday, is you put it all out there in some way, shape, or form. Brain dump. Put it on a wall calendar. We have you can't see it from here, but I have the Now Year, it's now called the Time Crafting wall calendar. It used to be called the Now Year wall calendar. And I can see all of my commitments as a bird's eye view of my year. Now, you could do this in a regular calendar, whatever. I love this calendar for the purposes of that. We haven't built the 2026 version yet, but it's coming. And I can look at this right now and say, oh, September's full. I can't commit to anything else. So if someone was to, hey, Mike, could you do a workshop in September? I'd go, no. Because I could see it. October, also, we have Maximize Your Minutes happening in October. So again, Mike, can you do this thing in October? No. Right? November opens up. But I also know that December will not be open because it's the holidays. So I can see all this right now. So if someone was to say, hey, Mike, can you work on this thing? If I can see all my other stuff in ClickUp, I could say, well, November looks good. Right? Same thing with when I schedule people for the podcast or when I schedule live streams. Like doing the Forge Your Future Challenge, this is my focus for this week up until Friday. And then I've got a workshop I'm doing in Vancouver on Saturday, which I'm looking forward to as well, because in-person workshops I love just as much as, if not more than doing these virtually. But that's my commitment. So put it all out there. The second thing is practice the Sivers kind of strategy. And what I mean by that is Derek Sivers has this TED Talk that he did where he talks about don't share your goals. Like keep it to yourself. And the reason that I use this as a strategy is when you put it out there, and this goes for the people pleasers, when you start to share this stuff, and I've done this many times, is once you put it out there, you've committed. Whether it's to someone, whether it's to yourself, whether it's to a group. So if you keep things quiet until you're ready, that helps you because you have time to assess it, right? So sometimes it's, hey, can you do this? Let me get back to you, right? That could be an example of starting to practice it, because then you have to look at what you've got going on, and then you share. And you don't necessarily need to share why you can't do the thing, but it's important to, not everything needs to be announced, because once it's declared, then that is a form and it can be perceived as a form of commitment. Finally, recognize a marathon versus a sprint. So, and this is, I think, where procrastination and such can set in too, is if you are working on a long-term project, then you will make bit by bit, step by step progress. If you look at things through that lens for those things that will take time, then you can commit accordingly, right? Often when we overcommit, we figure we can do that quickly, we can do that quickly, we can do that quickly, but all those sprints add up. And a marathon is slow, steady, consistent. Not always, for me it'd be slow, but it's slower than a sprint and steadier than a sprint. But a sprint, if you were to run, let's say a 500-meter marathon, about 500 meters, let's say you're going to run a marathon, which I think is 42 kilometers. You can't run sprints of that nature consistently, back to back to back to back to back. You just wouldn't be able to do it, right? But a marathon, when you've got your cadence down, you can. So it's important just to have that distinction of, is this something that I can, drip out bit by bit by bit by bit? Or is it something that's going to require intense focus, intense effort, intense energy right out of the gate? Is that what it's going to be? If so, there's only so many of those I can do. It's why when I talk about the idea of weekly sprints in the context of theming, I don't call them weekly themes, because a theme is broad. It's kind of like an umbrella. It's something that kind of defines it, but not in a way that goes, hey, you need to do this quickly, right? Whereas a weekly sprint, once you use that term sprint, it is still something that you say, hey, I need to focus on the Forge Your Future Challenge. It's a weekly sprint for me this week. So my intensity around those things has to be higher, which means I'm going to do less of the other. So if someone was to ask me, hey, Mike, what's going on with your writing this week? I would say not much. Why? Because I'm committed to this weekly sprint of the Forge Your Future Challenge. If you were to ask me 2 weeks from, not next week, but the week after, hey, Mike, are you doing a lot of writing this week? Nope. Inside of the Time Crafting Trust premium community, it's the Ready Retreat. So I'm committed to that. Those are 2 sprints. After that, the Maximize Your Minutes program, that's a marathon. It's spread out over the course of an entire month, which is why if someone was to take the Maximize Your Minutes program versus, say, an intense 2-hour workshop where we do all that, or more, a day-long workshop, let's say, the results might be different, right? If you're focused only on that one day of working with me, then the intensity level is high. And so the focus level has to be high. You can't really commit to any other things on those days. But over the course of a month, actually it's 5 weeks. 5 weeks, you've got other things you can put in there. So you have to recognize the difference between a calendar, or sorry, I saw someone said they checked the calendar, between a marathon and a sprint. All right. So we're going to do an exercise now. Enough talking for me. So this exercise is called Get Over It. If you are watching this live right now, I want you to let me know in the chat if you've got your brain dump kind of list from yesterday handy. If you do, just say yes in the chat. That way I know that some people are going to be able to do this in real time with what they built yesterday. And if not, if you don't have it, then you need to kind of look at your list or create a list. Maybe you've been doing like I asked or suggested. You could have been doing it during the course of the workshop so far today. But if you've got it, what I want you to do, and I'm going to give you a bit more time to do this. I'm going to give you at least 10 minutes to do this. Okay? Is I want you to look at each of these items on your list. You're not putting dates on it. You're not putting any of that stuff on it. I just want you to clarify for yourself. You're already got awareness. You've tapped into that. This is a combination of getting clear, but these tactics will allow you to stave off overwhelm because you'll be able to recognize which of the O's that we discussed is the one that you kind of look at and go, yeah, this is fine. I'm not overwhelmed by this, but this one, the reason I'm feeling overwhelmed is because, I've overcommitted. I'm overloaded. I have too many options, right? So I want you to assess your list. If it helps, looking at your list and putting like the word overchoice or overcommit next to those ones. But I want you to look at the list and figure out as you're going through it, listen, not just mentally, but also emotionally, like feel it. Ugh. If you look at the list, it's so big. Okay. So I have too many options. So which of these options should I eliminate or put onto a different paper or look at delaying? This is where you could actually say, hey, I'm not going to work on this till 2026. Put a simple, hey, 2026, or even a month. Hey, I'm going to work on this in February or November or what have you. But I want you to think about these 3 O's, the idea of overload, overchoice, overcommitment, and look at your list and define, hey, where is the problem here if I'm looking at all of this? And we'll talk about solutions for each of those 3 as we wrap up before we go into the end of the day. But I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to work on this. If you have any questions, I'll be able to respond in the chat. I've moved the chat off so I can kind of chime in there. You're not going to get this perfect because it could be, and we'll get into why it may not just be one of those things after the exercise. But I want you to just at least look at this and kind of get that visceral feeling around that stuff in front of you. By the way, if more stuff shows up in your head while you're doing this, capture it, get it out of your head, put it in front of you. That's what I want you to do. So again, those 3 options are overload, overchoice, overcommitment. Don't put overwhelm. We know that overwhelm is a combination or elements of those 3. All right. If you need any more clarity around that, again, I'll happily help you in the chat. But I'll give you 12 minutes. So we're going to go for 12 minutes on this. And when we'll circle back in 12 minutes and see how you did. All right. So how do we do? I'm looking at some of the comments here before we kind of get into the thing here. Let's see here. Let's circle around. And what I like here is, so Tim brings up, let's add this to the broadcast. So immediately here, obviously it's overload, loads of tasks and projects that I'm simply hoping to do with little chance of actually having time to do them, almost entirely self-generated. So what this feels like at this point is that, and by the way, you'll see when we get into how all of these ingredients kind of lead to overwhelm and what there could be a combination, intensity, all that stuff. There is the fact that you were able to kind of distinguish it so quickly, and then the feelings, just the visceral feelings around what you've commented there, especially the word around hope, right? Tells me that that overload, that intensity of overload is probably the contributing factor to overwhelm. And we'll talk about, I mean, you go through some of the tactics I alluded to earlier. It should help you with that. Not all three, maybe a combination of them, maybe one you focus on particularly. But there is going to be this element of deciding, right? Which is overchoice. So what's interesting is if you're overloaded, you're going to have to choose what to take off your plate, right? You're going to have to choose how to restrict the amount of time, not necessarily the what you're going to take off your plate. That could be it, but it also could be, hey, this is how many things I'm going to do in a given day, week, whatever, related to this. So that's my constraint. Joyce mentioned that it's over choice. Is over lost an option? This is Ksenia. And, you know, I wouldn't say that it's an option, but what I would say is that if you're feeling that way, then basically it's probably a healthy combination of all three: over choice, overload, overcommitment, that is making you feel lost. So the intensity level of all three may not necessarily be as, let's say, acute or as strong as, say, Tim's when he talks about overload. But, and I'll, by the way, I bring this up, Ksenia, only because your comment came after quite a few others. So I have a feeling you were, and I might be wrong on this, you had a feeling you were trying to figure out what it was. And you're like, oh man, is it this one? Is it this one? So that overlost element comes in, which means there's a dose of all three in there. Christina, who, again, as I mentioned yesterday, was a big proponent of us bringing back this challenge, a mixture of overload, overchoice, and overcommit, which totally makes sense. Mostly overload, making them into projects. See, that's a thing. Breaking them down shows you how much is there, which means you can then distribute the load more equally, right? Then the tasks become much more manageable and smaller and less daunting. All right. And let's see. This is let's see, the old someday list. And by the way, Marion, I think you're right. Helpful to have someone go through the list with me to gain perspective. This is something that we can definitely do inside the community. We've got some other things that are going to be going on inside of Time Crafting Trust Premium that will help with this, because we often don't think that, we just think of overwhelm as this one thing, right? I'm overwhelmed, right? But the ingredients inside of it, again, unpacking it and untangling it is a really key element. And sometimes it's hard to do that, again, on your own. So asking someone you trust, again, that leads to that overcommitment thing that we were talking about, or the overchoice rather. But all of them can play a role with that. So, and Gloria Jean, last one I'll share here, a mix of all three. The Declutter Project, which is it's a focus. So you've narrowed it down, but it's taking longer than anticipated. Might be worth breaking it down a little bit more. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, literally and figuratively, there. So let's move back into the wrapping up of kind of getting into where the ingredients fit in, and then getting to your worksheet that we're going to work on. So first off, let's bring that back. We will get rid of that countdown and move into this quote, which you know, for those of you that use Todoist, you might recognize this and say, oh, and by the way, I think I need to bring myself back as picture in picture. Let's do that real quick. There we go. Want you to see me. So enlightenment must come little by little, otherwise it would be overwhelmed. This is a writer, author, of a more philosophical bent, Idris Shah. And what I like about this is, if you've used, like I said, Todoist, there is the enlightened phase if you have enough Todoist karma, right? And it's not like you get there out of nowhere. No, by the way, there is some formula for how Todoist's karma works. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, I totally get it. And I'm not going to go into detail with it. But it's not like you sign up for Todoist today and then in 3 weeks you're going to be enlightened. There's phases, right? And I honestly believe things like, especially with the work that I've done and spending so much time in this area over the years, anyone who's spent a lot of time in one specific area of study, they go through these phases and alterations as well. They go from, like in my case, being, somewhat of an enthusiast. Hey, I'm an enthusiast about this topic of being productive and managing one's relationship with time. But back then it would have been, I'm enthusiastic about productivity and time management. And then I became somewhat of a specialist around it, right? So now I know enough about it that I can actually help people with it. I know enough about these apps. I know enough about the traditional advice and so on and stuff that's out there. And so I'm imparting that onto others. Again, time management, productivity. Then I became a bit more of a strategist. And this didn't happen, I can't tell you, oh, and by year 5 or by year 7 or what have you. I don't know exactly when those transformations took place, when those phases shifted, but they certainly did. And then I became a strategist, which is I have my own methods, the time crafting as a framework. And, even talking about some of the elements that I talk about in other areas, right? Not necessarily related to time crafting, but some of the other, like the SOS stuff and simple, obvious, and sustainable, those sort of things. Like I develop frameworks and systems, communities, all that stuff. I'm able to coach people better. And then I don't know when this transformation totally happened or flipped, but I will say that lately, and those that are inside the community, the Time Crafting Crust community, and those that follow my, get my Lantern emails and such, I'm more philosophical about this stuff than ever before. And that's why when, I don't say time management, I say managing your relationship with time. I'm cautious about that. Instead of productivity, the productivity diet was kind of, again, wouldn't say a swan song to the word productivity or to the idea of productivity, but maybe to the word. So if you've read the book, that I'm talking about the state of productiveness and being productive. So trying, like, having spent so much time in this, you get to that point. And enlightenment, I mean, I'm not trying to draw the exact comparison, so it might be a bit clunky, but the idea of enlightenment, if you were to become enlightened all at once, you'd be blown away, right? And I'm sure you've come across stuff where it was like, again, drinking from a fire hose, or just like you're just overwhelmed by everything. Maybe it's you're overwhelmed by beauty, or you're not a bad thing, but it's just too much all at once. That list that I had you write down, too much all at once, right? And that in and of itself is really why overwhelm isn't just, one ingredient or 2 ingredients, or, it's this or that. It's nuanced. It's overload plus overchoice plus overcommitment. Sometimes it's just 2 of them. It's rarely just one. It's often a mix. So when you were able to identify which one is your primary, which Tim did, which, we can see overchoice. Ksenia, right there. I see overchoice. I think that's the leader, right? That 1O is the one that usually leads. The others will add weight, right? Now, why I'm calling it your primary O is because you were able to kind of decipher, hey, this is the big one. This, if I can tackle this one or minimize this one, then I will feel less overwhelmed. You may not eliminate it. To say that when I say overcome overwhelm, I didn't say eliminate overwhelm, because you have to overcome it. And it's not a magic bullet. It's not a one-stop shop. It's not a you know, that's it. Never to be overwhelmed again. 1 O though usually leads of the 3. All right. So how does this work? Like so if I have my primary and maybe you figure that out, then, well, how does that work? Like what weight is the other one's adding? And here's really what it boils down to. It's really about, when it comes to overwhelm, the intensity of the 3 or a combination of the 3. And really what it is actually more is it's an intensity of the 1. It's a single O turned up way high. Turned up to 11. Sorry, that was a bad British accent, but I was doing my Spinal Tap there. But it's like the sequel's coming out, and there's the old adage of where all their amps went up to 11, and the documentarian Rob Reiner said, well, why don't you just make 10 louder, and then it just goes up to 10, and the Christopher Guest's character Nigel Tufnell says, just pauses, doesn't know what to say, he goes, but this goes to 11. So again, the disconnect there, but something turned all the way up. So if you were able to really identify, so in Tim's example, it's overload, that's intensity cranked. For me, if it's it's overcommitment. That's the intensity cranked up. Not going to say that it's only that, but the intensity of it means I don't need to have all 3. It's just the one primary that's leading, right? For Ksenia, you ultimately acquiesced and said it's probably overchoice, right? Well, overchoice, it may not be that intense. It may be the most intense, but it may not be cranked as high as, say, for me or for Tim or for someone else out there as well. The other thing is it may be 2 O's colliding, right? So again, overload. So let's say Tim, we'll use you as an example. Let's say you decide, okay, it's overload. I'm going to look at everything that I've committed to, that I've got here in front of me. You can see probably where I'm going with this, and I'm going to assess it. And now you've got, there's so many to choose from. Well, what do I do? All of a sudden, overchoice is creeping in there. So it's colliding with the bigger one, which is overload. Or let's say you've already committed to some things. You've declared, I'm going to do this, either internally or externally. Now that's combining and colliding with the primary for you, which is overload. For me, if it's overcommitment, I can tell you right now that both of the other O's will have a role. I've committed to too many. That's my primary. Okay, well, what do I do? Oh man, I have so many options. Okay, well, what are you going to choose? Oof, I don't know. Seems like a lot. Like I can't choose to have them all in this one day or this 1 month or what have you. Now all of a sudden overload showing up. So it takes work. It takes effort. It takes energy. It can be all 3 at once too, right? And the intensity in combination is really what plays a role, right? So Ksenia points out, and I'm going to add this to the overchoice, then overload. All right. I have too many choices. Let's say, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Ksenia. Okay, great. I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to do most of these in September. Oh my goodness, look how busy September is now. You have to go wide and zoom out. Like I said, get some boundaries around that and say, okay, well, if I have so many options, but also I can spread this out over a longer period of time or a longer space of time. You have to sit with this. This is where reflection comes in, right? And then the action would be to make the change. So all 3 at once can be the issue. 2 O's colliding can be the issue. Only 2. And 1 single O turned up really high, but it's often a mix, right? So as we get close to wrapping up today, I hope I didn't quote overwhelm you, but this is an area that I really think that once and that's why I said yesterday, you really need to spend time with this today so that you can move into the 3rd day where we're going to talk about process and flow, or process and flow, depending on where you're from. But unless you deal with, again, awareness and clarity, getting clear, being aware, that's helped you with these decisions today around overwhelm. And then really get a handle on, okay, all right, well, where's my overwhelm coming from? Then when you go into process and flow, you're going to be able to make better decisions around that. But you have to have that distinction. All right. So what is today's daily exercise as we get close to wrapping up? Like I said, we've set aside 2 hours, but we probably won't use all 2 hours each day. We didn't use all 2 hours yesterday. We're not going to use all of it today. So again, this worksheet, this handy dandy worksheet will help you with this. There is a fillable version, which means you can do it digitally or you can print it off and write it out. As I mentioned yesterday, might be more beneficial for you to print it out and write on it. So that way there's that stickiness that happens, but really the choice is yours. So what is the questions for today? Well, number one, when you think about your future, what is one thing that overwhelms you? One thing. So it could be, like Tim, I have too many things to do. So many things that I've put on my plate, not necessarily committed to, but loaded onto my plate. And it's overwhelming me. Another could be, well, let's use Gloria Jean's example. And again, this is probably a bit muddy, but we'll try it anyway. I committed to this. The thing that's overwhelming me right now is this move. It could just be that simple as that, the move. That's my future. Like, what will it look like from there to here? Right. Let's say that's what it is. And I mean, again, I'm paraphrasing. I grokked a little bit of what you were talking about in the chat, and I might be misconstruing it a little bit, but nonetheless, it doesn't have to be this grand kind of, oh, all these things are overwhelming. Think about one thing that overwhelms you. We tackle it again, bit by bit, piece by piece. All right. The next question on the worksheet is, besides yourself, who do you need to better communicate with so that things seem less overwhelming to you? So in some cases, it could be a partner. I'll use an example from me. Actually, it's a great example. It's from yesterday. And Sarah and I talked about this after we were done. When we finished this session, we did a bit of a debrief, which we'll do again today. And then I had to cook dinner. Now, the way I cook dinner in our household, because I'm the one that's working from home and my wife teaches as well as practices acupuncture. So she's got a full day. Today is another one of those days where I will be cooking dinner. And I knew I was going out to meet a friend who I hadn't seen in a while. And I wanted to make sure that I could be fully present for that. Now, remember, keep in mind that this is not something I just did in one day. This is, again, over time, I've built these kind of things in place that allow me to kind of operate in such a way. So I went upstairs and I grabbed the Instant Pot. I'm the only one in my house that used the Instant Pot that we have. I don't even think I got it as a gift. I think I bought it as a family appliance. They gifted me my air fryer, which everybody uses, but nobody uses the thing I bought, which is the Instant Pot. Well, I mean, if you have an Instant Pot, you know that it does pressure cooking, it does slow cooking, it does rice. You can even make yogurt in it if you want. I knew that I wasn't going to be home for dinner. I knew that my son was going to his first full day at school, which can be exhausting, and my wife was going to be working a full day. And so I needed to make something simple. And we already agreed that pasta was going to be on the menu. Every Sunday, we have what we call the effing meeting. My wife and I, it's a bit of a sidebar, where we talk about food, finance, fun, and family. All those 4 things, rather. And we don't talk about them in any particular order, but one of those things is food, which is a meal plan. We knew based on our schedule that Wednesday was going to be pasta night because I wasn't going to be home for dinner necessarily, so on and so forth. So at 10:15-ish, I think, so about 15 minutes after the top of the hour here, went upstairs, set the Instant Pot up, got the dinner going, came downstairs, got back into the live stream that we did with the podcast yesterday because I had another live stream to do. Mike, why are you telling us this? I don't understand. The Instant Pot. My family doesn't like the Instant Pot very much. And they were, why do you use it? I don't understand. And I said, by using the Instant Pot and having this kitchen appliance along with the air fryer, along with the sous vide machine that we have, it limits the amount of choice that I have to, and it allows me to do what I'm meant to do in that moment so that I can make sure that I'm serving you guys dinner and also serving myself as the person who's working from home. So I can give my best to folks like you who are watching this either live or on the replay. So I'm going to use the Instant Pot. This is where I'm going to use. I'm going to communicate that to my family. Now that might seem really innocuous and stuff like, but it does two things. Number one, it justifies the actual purchase of that tool many years ago, but also it creates this, when Mike's cooking dinner, he's going to use things that are going to make, dinner making as with more efficacy. That way I'm not overwhelmed by my responsibilities, both to my, to those that keep up with my work and to my craft, but also to my family. That's it. Now, I mean, again, I'm telling you the story, but for me, it was like, just so you know, guys, I'm going to use the Instant Pot a lot. Okay. That way they know. Like, and if it's that small, imagine what it would be when I say, hey, it's time for us to sit down and have our Sunday meeting, which we do, the effing meeting. And then during the course of the week, guess what my wife and I have to talk about? Not anything related to the meeting. We've already set the table, pun intended. So we know. So we've limited choice. That meeting in and of itself helps stave off overwhelm. So again, who besides yourself, because you have to communicate this to yourself, who else do you need to? You could list of several people there too. Maybe you have to list your boss. Maybe you have to list your kids. But this is an area that once you start practicing that, because that's a way to set boundaries, right? All right. And then the third question. Name 1 to 3 things, I'm giving you more than one option, that you are going to stop doing in the future. You're like, Mike, but we didn't talk about, we were just talking about doing. We didn't talk about stop doing. When it comes to overload, overcommitment, overchoice, the stop has to happen. There has to be things removed, subtracted, right? So what are you going to stop doing? It could be as simple as I am going to stop scheduling more than six things per day on my list. Now you're like, wait, Mike, I have to do more than 6 things. I'm not arguing that. But the 6 things that you intend to do, if you have 6 things listed and you pay attention to them, that could be considered to be a productive day for you. So I'm going to stop adding more tasks that are of value to my list than 6. To me. Doesn't mean you're not necessarily going to answer emails and all that stuff. Maybe you need to expand that. 6 things per week. I'm just throwing an arbitrary number out there, although many of you know why I like 6 hexagons. I mentioned that yesterday. So commit to a date or dates that you will make this happen, and then mark it on your calendar. And if you have now your calendar, that could be it. It could be your Google Calendar. It could be any calendar, a day planner, or what have you. And notice I said 1 to 3 things. So if you're going to do one, if it's a very big thing and you feel overwhelmed by just choosing one, pick 1. If you get to 3 or can get up to 3, I would imagine those things have to be a bit smaller. Okay? I don't want you to overwhelm yourself with this choice. Basically, you're practicing the idea of putting overcommitment and casting it aside, reducing your amount of choices, which is overchoice, and also avoiding overloading yourself with that commitment. Again, the commitment to a date. 1 to 3 things. That's the overload. The commitment part is the date or dates. And then again, the 1 to 3 is the choice. But I don't want it to be stuck. And by the way, you can flip this. I've seen some people do this when I did the challenge before. And it would be, I'm going to stop not doing this. So I'm going to, like, for example, a great example from my vantage point is, I'm going to stop, I'm going to stop not napping during the day for an hour, because I realize that napping is incredibly valuable to me, and I'm going to set aside some time to that. Like, there you go. Like, that's a way to kind of flip it and trick it a little bit if you want, But it's really valuable to just decide, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. And not, no, I'm not going to do this. Adding a double negative to the mix. You can do all of this on your worksheet. And I encourage you to do this. Now, what I want you to do is, if you're in the Facebook group, which you might be, if you're not, if you're a member of the Time Crafting Trust community, you can do this in the Time Crafting Trust community. We'll be doing a post for each day in the community about this, so you can comment in there. Or if you're feeling brave and you want to go live, share your 1 to 3 things in the Facebook group and then use the hashtag, because it's just easier to find that way, that you're going to stop doing in the Facebook group. And I know, Glory Jean, you posted the Facebook group yesterday. If you are not in the Facebook group already and you want to be, just ask and we will approve you to be part of that group. You don't have to go live. You could just comment. You can just share it. That's what Gloria Jean did. That's what others have done as well. And again, if you don't want to do that on Facebook, let's say you're not on Facebook and you're not in the Time Crafting Trust community, then you can just comment in the comments. Hey, here's what I'm going to do. Here's my big action move. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to get close to wrapping up here. Tomorrow, we're going to close out the challenge by talking about process and flow. So you've become aware and clarified. You're working towards overcoming overwhelm. And now we're going to, okay, now that we've removed some of the roadblocks, we've gotten clear, we've removed some of the friction. Now it's about, what process can I put in place so that I can have flow? And when you have flow and you've got a process in place that promotes it, then you can really forge the future that you need and that you want. So, any other thoughts or questions in the chat? I will take a look as we've got about 10 minutes left. Let's see here. A lot of Instant Pot stuff. I feel overwhelmed. Okay, here we go. Let's do this. Marion says, I feel overwhelmed at the thought of meal planning. I think it's good to chat with you about this, Marion, in particular, because I think others can help. All right, so let's break meal planning down into, first off, most people go grocery shopping and then they plan around the groceries that they purchase, which is fine. But the problem is that you are going into the grocery store with a list and without necessarily intent around what that list is entirely for. You know, you're going to pick up things that you're out of. You're adding new things to the mix. Again, the Costco thing. Oh my goodness, they have this thing on sale. I'll buy that, with no intent. Again, so again, you're removing some of the intent from it. If you meal plan, there's 2 ways that we do it. Number 1 is we look at the inventory that we have. I know it sounds really weird to say that, but we look in our fridge. We go, what do we have? What meats do we have? Oh, we have chicken breasts. We have, and that's what we're having tonight. We have ground beef. We have this. We have that. All right, great. We have a starting off point. We've done a rough, loose inventory of what we have. Can we do anything with that? Yes, no. Okay, great. What sides do we want? That sort of thing. And then we start adding those things to our grocery list. So all of a sudden, and this is where the finance and food come into play, and the family, to be honest, for that meeting. And I've written a blog post about that as well. I don't know if Sarah can find it and put it in the chat. It's called the one meeting I make time for every single week, I think is the name of the blog post. So it ties in really nicely, because we look at what our family situation is going to be like for the week. And, oh, Mike's not going to be home. Like, I'm not going to be home for dinner this Friday night because I'm going to Vancouver. So that's one less person we have to cook for, per se. I will be home on Saturday. On Sunday, we have a new student moving in with us. We have to take that into account. So we look at the calendar, really, and we go, okay, well, this is what our week looks like. Okay, so now, oh, and what are you working? Oh, you're doing this. Oh, Mike, you're doing this challenge this week. Okay, so we need to make meals a little bit easier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Then we also do a budget at that time. So we then set a budget for our groceries. You don't necessarily have to do that, but we do, because we want to make sure that, groceries don't go to waste and that we're not spending money that we don't need to. There's nothing worse than buying something at the grocery store and we're like, oh, we already have this, right? Or we don't need this for another month, right? That sort of thing. And then we isolate our meal plans. And to be fair, I would love to plan 7 days worth of meals, because then by the way, just because I plan it doesn't mean it's always the choice. It's just the starting off point. It's the default. So today it's chicken breasts. That's the default. But if if we decide to change the plan, that's fine. At least we have a plan to start from, not what are all the things we could possibly do. Oh my goodness, there's so many things to choose from. At this point, it's like, we have chicken breast. Okay, what's the recipe? Well, let me look up what recipe I want to make, right? And then we take it from there. Yesterday was pasta. I knew exactly what to make. Today, I know exactly what ingredient to make. I know what my meal is going to be. We know what it's going to be. And we do it for 5 days of the week. We don't do the weekends, typically. So I encourage you, if you're meal planning for family, kids, whatever, by doing it, you're saving. You could end up saving yourself time. You can end up saving yourself money. And you can end up saving yourself the fatigue of, what are we going to have for dinner? Because often what will happen, and I have friends, and we've done this too. I don't feel like cooking tonight. Well, what were we going to have? Nothing. Okay, well, let's just order in. Right? So by having a plan, you can take action. Without a plan, you're kind of working from overwhelm in a lot of cases. So, Barry, when you say that I feel overwhelmed at the thought of meal planning, get past that thought and give it a try and see what happens. Because let's face it, most times that we plan meals, most people, when they plan meals, they're normally planning big holiday meals. Oh my goodness, it's Thanksgiving. What are all the things I need? Oh, it's so-and-so is coming over for dinner. We better plan something. That is often the thing that's attached to the meal plan that is overwhelming you. Right? For us, when we have someone coming over for dinner, we're just like, okay, we got to make more of this thing. Or if we know somebody's coming over, like we have Thanksgiving coming up here in Canada in about 6 weeks. We know that because we're going to have a student living with us that's not from Canada, that we're going to want to celebrate Thanksgiving, which we typically don't do a big ornate meal for, but we want to give them the experience. So we've already planned for that. Once you make it part of how you operate, it doesn't feel as onerous. It doesn't feel as overwhelming. And incidentally, and I actually like what Christina said. There's this was a wonderful show about random cooking. I don't know which show that was. I'll have to find it. I think you mentioned it before. Yes, and I actually, this is the one I want to add. So I've recently discovered the joy of using ChatGPT for meal planning and recipes, and it can create a shopping list for you. Yes, it can, because that's exactly how we do it. That's exactly how we do it. Not all the time. And I'm the only one that does that, and Sarah and I have had a couple chats around, my wife said, you made this amazing salmon a few weeks ago. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that is. Because it wasn't in a recipe book. I had to actually look up the recipe that I had created with ChatGPT through the ingredients that I have. And again, that's a really good example of staving off overwhelm. Because a lot of people say, well, why don't you just Google recipes for chicken? I'm like, that's great. And I could. But there's 2 reasons I don't want to do that, maybe more. Number one, I don't necessarily want to read the blog post to find out what the recipe is, because that's often what happens. And secondly, Google can't, at this point, now obviously there's AI interspersed with Google at this point as well through Gemini, but it doesn't know what ingredients I have in my fridge. Whereas if with generative AI, and again, this is just a nice use case for it. You don't have to do this. I just do it because it helps me stay, keep things moving in the right direction. Is I can say, hey, we want a Southwest chicken breast dinner. We have the following ingredients that I want to use, and I want to use my air fryer for the sides, and I want to use the sous vide machine for the main. Can you come up with 3 recipes? And it does. So that part is less overwhelming to me now, but I'm not reliant on it. If I don't want to use AI for it or ChatGPT or whatever, I don't. We have recipe books. I could just look them up. But it reduces overwhelm. It reduces choice, which is what I need, because what do I need to be focusing on? This, and just enjoying time with my family. There's this great song by James Taylor called The Secret of Life. And one of the things he says is the secret of life is enjoying the passing of time. And this kind of way of making my way through the world is allowing me to enjoy the passing of time. So I know that's a long way to kind of get to it, but yeah. Ready, Steady, Cook is the name of the show. Thanks. So any other thoughts, questions before we wrap up? We're pretty much at the top of the hour. We can wrap things up now. Tomorrow, again, we are back with process and flow. I'm looking forward to it. If you're watching the replay, you'll get an email. And if you're watching live, you'll get an email as well with the links and the worksheets that you can access and all that stuff. I encourage you to be here tomorrow. If you've missed the first 2 days, or you've missed, let's say you're going into day 3 and you haven't fully spent time with both the first 2 days, you'll be able to get something out of day 3 for sure. But ideally, spend some time with those worksheets for day 1 and day 2 before we go into day 3. And I'm going to let you focus on that as we wrap things up today. Thank you so much for being here, whether you're here live or whether you are watching the replay. And I look forward to seeing you for day 3, the final day of the Forge Your Future Challenge. I'll see you later.